Welcome back to another deep dive. Today we're going to do something a little different.
Hmm.
We are going to turn down the lights, lock the doors, and travel back in time.
I like where this is going.
Back to a very specific, very windy Saturday night in 1965. We're stepping into a room lit by a single candle to listen in on a conversation that, well, it starts like a ghost story and ends up like a quantum physics lecture.
It really is a perfect storm of a session, isn't it? You have the atmosphere, you have this intense personal drama playing out,
Right?
and then you have these just mind-bending metaphysical truths dropped right in the middle of it all. It's spooky, it's funny, and honestly, it's just so profound.
Exactly. And for everyone listening, we are diving back into the Seth Material. Specifically, we're looking at session 182.
A really dense one.
It is. But before we get too deep into the shadows, I need to make sure we handle the usual housekeeping. This podcast is distributed completely free of charge on all major platforms, and it's for educational purposes. We're here to explore, to learn, and to share this information.
And just so everyone has the citations, the source material for today is session 182. It's from the early sessions, book 4 of the Seth Material.
No.
The date of record is August 28th, 1965.
Yeah.
And as always, full credit and our thanks go to the publisher, the New Awareness Network.
Okay, so the scene. Let's set the scene for everybody. August 28th, 1965. We're in upstate New York. It's late. It's a Saturday.
Right. And it's an unscheduled night, which is important. Usually, Jane Roberts, who is, of course, the channel for Seth, and her husband, Robert Butts, would have a set schedule, a routine.
Tuesdays and Thursdays or something like that.
Something like that. But tonight, they're just relaxing. Or at least they're trying to.
Trying to, because the weather is not cooperating at all.
Not even a little bit.
Mhm.
The source material is so specific about the atmosphere, the wind is just howling outside.
Oh, wow.
It's one of those nights where the house itself feels like it's being battered. The windows are rattling in their frames. It really feels like a setup for a Gothic novel.
And Robert, who Seth, of course, calls Joseph, he is just suffering.
He is miserable. Absolutely miserable. He has terrible hay fever.
Oh, that's the worst on a windy night.
The worst. The wind is kicking up all the pollen, all the dust, and he is just congested, sneezing. His eyes are watering. He's in a state of real physical distress.
And then in the middle of all this chaos, the doorbell rings.
In walk the friends.
Hmm.
Bill and Peggy Gallagher drop by completely unexpectedly.
Ah.
And because the mood is already so strange, with the wind and the rattling windows, they decide, let's try a session. But they don't turn on the lamps.
No, they go for the full seance vibe, don't they? They light a single candle.
A single candle on a low coffee table. They're all sitting around it. I think it says they were holding hands at one point.
Yeah.
The only other light is just this faint reflection coming from the kitchen and the bedroom. Otherwise, they're in semi-darkness, just watching this little flame flicker in what they assume is a draft.
That sets such a specific tone, doesn't it? I mean, usually we talk about Seth in these very high-level philosophical terms.
The nature of God, the soul, all that.
Yeah, exactly. But this session feels so gritty. It feels physical. It literally starts with the environment itself.
That's a great observation. And what's so fascinating about this particular deep dive is how Seth uses that physical environment. He uses the candle, the wind, the coffee table. He uses them as teaching tools. He doesn't ignore the spooky atmosphere. He actually leans right into it.
Okay, so let's get into that. Let's talk about the candle. Because this isn't just a light source. It becomes a prop in a full-on demonstration.
It absolutely does. Robert notes in the transcript that the candle was burning really, really low. He said the flame was only about 1/4 of an inch high.
So it's basically a dying stub.
Just a little nub of wax, exactly. And then Seth comes through Jane with this incredible energy. Robert describes him as being in a frisky mood.
Frisky. I love that word choice.
It's perfect, isn't it? And he starts talking about physical effects. He mentions, almost casually, that with Jane's help, he could probably levitate the coffee table that they were all sitting at.
The casualness of that is just stunning. Oh, by the way, I could lift this heavy piece of furniture with my mind, but...
Right. He says Jane, or Rupert, as he always calls her, needs more confidence for that kind of,
Right.
Heavy lifting.
Right, right.
But then, right as he's talking about this potential for physical manipulation, he draws their attention to that little dying candle.
And what happens?
The flame, which was just sputtering a second ago, suddenly shoots up. It doubles in height, becomes incredibly bright, and it lights up the whole circle of them sitting there.
And Seth immediately says,
I did that. He takes full credit.
Okay, now I have to play the skeptic for a second. I know you're thinking it. I know the listener's thinking it too.
Of course.
It's a windy night. The windows are rattling. Robert has hay fever, specifically because of all the drafts. He's in this just, wind, a gust of wind.
That is exactly what Robert and Bill Gallagher thought in the moment. They are the skeptics in the room. They immediately start rationalizing it in their heads. Oh, must have been a stray burst of wind from the kitchen window, the pressure change. You can almost hear their minds working.
So how does Seth handle that? Does he get defensive? Does he say, no, you have to believe me?
No, and this is the part I love. He gets scientific about it. He predicts the future behavior of the flame. He says essentially, it's not going to happen again.
Why not? Did the wind suddenly stop?
No. This is the fascinating part. He says it won't happen again because Jane is now looking at it.
Because she's observing it.
Yes. He says because the medium is now alerted to the effect and watching it with her conscious analytical mind, the interference stops the phenomenon cold.
That sounds exactly like the observer effect in quantum physics. The idea that just by measuring a particle or observing a system, you fundamentally change the outcome.
It's precisely that. Seth is saying that these big physical phenomena, poltergeist activity, levitation, these candle tricks, they're fragile. They rely on the subconscious operating freely, without the critical conscious mind clamping down on it.
So once Jane's analytical brain got involved, the energy just dissipated.
It was gone. And true to his word, the flame died back down and it stayed down for the rest of the night.
It's a very clever way to address their skepticism. He's not just saying, believe me because I'm a spirit. He's giving them a mechanical explanation for why you can't just replicate this on demand in a lab.
And he even comments on that, on the whole parlor trick aspect of it. He admits he isn't usually interested in physical proofs.
He finds him a bit beneath him, almost.
A little bit, yeah. He knows humans, and especially scientists, are obsessed with them. They want to see the table float. But to him, that's just child's play. The real proof, he insists, is in the information he delivers.
Speaking of physical proofs, though, the voice itself was a pretty dramatic physical phenomenon that night.
Oh, it really was. Robert made several notes that Seth's voice was incredibly powerful. The volume climbed very, very high a couple of times.
That must have been jarring.
Can you imagine? Sitting in the dark in this intense atmosphere, and suddenly the person next to you is projecting their voice at double the normal volume.
Oh.
It would make you jump out of your skin.
And there's that one moment at the very end of the night that is straight out of a horror movie.
Oh, the jump scare.
Yes.
Tell us about that.
It's too good. So the session is over. It's late now. It's past 1 a.m. Everyone is, I'm sure, completely exhausted emotionally and mentally.
Right.
Totally drained. Bill Gallagher is leaving. He opens the hall door to go out into the windy night. And suddenly, Jane, who is supposedly out of trance, gets possessed by Seth for just a split second.
Yeah.
And she shouts a few words at the top of her lungs, so loudly that Bill just panics.
What did he do?
He slammed the door shut. He was so startled, he just slammed it and stood there for a second. I just love that. It shows that while Seth is this incredibly deep philosophical teacher, he also has this mischievous side, a sense of humor.
A trickster energy.
Yes. He's not above a little boo to end the night on.
It really humanizes the entity, if that makes sense. It shows a distinct personality. It's not just a dry flow of information.
Okay, so we've established the vibe. We've got the candle. We've got the wind, the shouting voice, a truly spooky night. But now let's pivot to something that seems, on the surface, very mundane, but ends up being one of the most profound parts of this entire session.
Robert's hay fever.
Robert's hay fever.
This is where we get deep into what Seth calls the psychology of health. And honestly, if you're listening right now and you suffer from allergies or chronic aches and pains or anything that seems to flare up with stress,
You really need to pay attention to this next part.
absolutely, because it might just change how you see your own body.
So Robert is miserable. He's sneezing, he's congested, and he assumes, like any of us would, it's the pollen, it's the wind, it's a physical reaction to a physical irritant.
Right. Biological cause and effect. A equals B.
Yeah.
But Seth just ignores the biology completely. He doesn't talk about histamines or pollen counts. He goes straight into the psychology.
And he takes Robert back in time.
Way back. To 1922. Robert would have been about 3 years old.
Just a toddler.
Exactly. A little kid.
Hmm.
And he paints this picture. The family is traveling west of the Mississippi. They're out on the prairie somewhere. And it's a very, very windy day.
Okay, so the wind is the trigger. That makes sense.
A wind is the anchor. It's the sensory detail that locked the memory in place. But the actual event, the trauma, is emotional.
What happened?
Seth reveals that on this specific windy day, Robert's parents were having a massive, loud, vicious argument.
Oh, no.
And in the middle of this fight, his father threatened to leave the family.
To just abandon them.
Yes,
Mm.
I'm done with this. I'm walking out.
Yeah.
And you have to imagine, for a 3-year-old boy, that is the end of the world. The father figure represents security, authority, the absolute pillar of survival.
He's threatening to just disappear, to destroy the entire family unit.
It's a primal terror, absolute core-level terror.
Huh.
Now, here is the connection, the linchpin of the whole thing.
Okay.
Robert's father also suffered from hay fever.
Ah. I think I see where this is going. This is incredible.
Isn't it? Seth explains that in that moment of pure terror, the 3-year-old Robert identified with his father.
What does that mean, identified?
He reasoned, with a child's simple logic, that the father was the powerful one in this situation because he had the power to leave. He had all the agency.
The power to destroy the world.
Exactly. So to be safe, to be strong, to survive this threat, Robert's subconscious decided he needed to be like the father. He had to adopt the father's characteristics.
And the most obvious physical characteristic of the father at that moment
Was the hay fever. Seth says, and this is almost a direct quote, that Robert acquired the hay fever as a mistaken sign of strength. It was a subconscious, magical thinking attempt to mimic the powerful, albeit terrifying, figure in his life. If I sneeze like Dad, I am strong like Dad, and he won't leave me.
That is just, it's profound. We think of illness as a weakness. I caught a cold. I have a weakness in my immune system. But Seth is flipping that entirely. He's saying, no, you adopted this illness as a shield. You chose it as a form of psychic armor.
Precisely. And then Seth throws in this little zinger, which is so typical of his dry humor. He notes that Robert's father eventually got rid of his own hay fever later in life.
And Seth's explanation is,
Seth, he gave it to you.
oof, that's rough.
Here, son, you carry this baggage for the next 40 years.
But it's a perfect illustration of a mechanism Seth talks about all the time, that illnesses aren't just caught from germs or pollen. They can be telepathically or psychologically passed about within family groups based on these deep, powerful emotional needs or guilt or fear or identification.
And this wasn't just a one-off analysis for Robert. The guest, Bill Gallagher, was having his own health issues, right? And Seth goes right for him next.
Oh yeah, no one is safe. Bill had an ulcer, and Seth does not mince words with him at all. He calls the ulcer a parasite.
A parasite. That's so blunt, incredibly blunt. And then he tells Bill, flat out, you no longer need it.
I love the implication of that word, need, as in, okay, you've used this ulcer for whatever psychological purpose you had for the last decade, but you can put it down now. You're done with it.
That is the absolute core of the Seth philosophy on health. We create our reality, including our ailments, for a reason. Once the reason is gone, or once it's brought into the light of conscious understanding, the ailment can just dissolve.
And so Seth digs into Bill's family history to explain why he might have needed an ulcer in the first place. He brings up Bill's mother.
He does. And this part was heavy. It's revealed that Bill's mother had severe crippling arthritis, which was actually similar to Jane's mother's condition.
A parallel there.
A definite parallel.
Okay.
And Seth explains the utility of that arthritis. He says that Bill's mother was, deep down, a very aggressive, very masculine personality who was harboring a lot of rage.
Rage at who?
At her family. He says she felt this growing aggression toward Bill's father, and even toward the family unit itself.
So she was angry all the time.
Dangerously angry. And Seth suggests she subconsciously developed the arthritis, which immobilized her, which crippled her, as a way to control that rage.
To lock it down.
Literally. She locked her own body down so she couldn't physically act out and harm the people she also loved.
My God, that is tragic. But also, in a really twisted subconscious way, it's almost noble, isn't it?
It's a sacrifice.
Yeah.
A pathological one, for sure, but a sacrifice nonetheless. She used illness to prevent herself from acting on her violent impulses. And Seth points out that Bill, as a child, completely misunderstood this whole dynamic.
How so?
Well, Bill blamed his father for his mother's condition. He thought his father was the cause of her suffering.
And Seth gives a reason for that.
Oh, yes. He reveals a primal scene memory. He says Bill, as a very small child, overheard his parents having sex, and his mother cried out.
And he interpreted it as
pain, as his father hurting her. It's a classic childhood misunderstanding of adult sexuality.
But it lodged in his mind.
It lodged in his mind and created this lifelong resentment. Bill subconsciously blamed his father for breaking his mother, never realizing that the mother was, in a way, breaking herself to protect the entire family from her own internal rage.
It's just incredible how Seth acts as a therapist in these sessions. He's untangling psychological knots that have been pulled tight for 30, 40 years.
And he's doing it live, in front of friends, on a random Saturday night. It's incredibly intense.
But of course, with claims like this, your mother felt this deep rage, or you remember this specific thing from when you were 3, it's very easy for a skeptic to just say.
Jane is just guessing.
Exactly. She's a good cold reader. She's reading their body language. She's just making up a plausible story that fits the general situation.
Which brings us perfectly to the third segment of this deep dive, the validation. Seth knows the intellectual mind doubts. He knows Bill is sitting there thinking, how could she possibly know this?
So he pivots.
He pivots hard. He stops the psychoanalysis for a moment and starts dropping what I like to call informational bombs.
Hard facts that are verifiable.
Specific, concrete details that Jane Roberts and Robert Buds could not possibly have known.
And this is where we get the famous blue dress incident.
The bluegrass. Seth just starts talking about Bill's mother and says out of the blue that she was fascinated by the color blue.
Which, okay, on its own, that's a pretty generic guess. Oh, she liked blue. A lot of people like blue.
It could be a lucky guess,
Yeah.
true, but then he gets specific. And Peggy, Bill's wife, confirms it right there in the session.
Huh.
She says that Bill's mother was actually buried in a blue dress.
Okay, that's way more specific.
And not only that, but it was a point of contention. It upset Bill's father.
Yeah.
And she confirms that her mother-in-law had a wardrobe full of blue dresses. It was her signature color.
Wow.
But Seth doesn't stop there. He then drops another detail, this time about her profession. He said she was a bookkeeper.
Did Jane and Robert know this?
Absolutely not. Robert notes it in the transcript. They had no idea. But after the session, Bill confirms it. Yes, she was a bookkeeper. And Seth had added the detail that she was fascinated by the relationships between numbers.
A bookkeeper, numbers, the blue dress. These are very distinct, non-obvious data points.
And there's more. He also mentioned she was very fond of flowers, which the Gallaghers immediately confirmed. And then he pinpoints a date. He says to look at a summer Sunday of 1946.
What happened on that specific day?
Seth says it was a pivotal moment for Bill. It involved a career disagreement with his father, and there was an older man with brown hair who was an authority figure present.
And this was important because
It was the moment Bill definitively decided not to follow in his father's footsteps, which cemented the lifelong rift between them. It was a core memory.
So Seth is triangulating his evidence. He's giving this deep emotional truth. You've been blaming your father, but he's backing it up with hard, factual data. Blue dress, bookkeeper, 1946, to prove that the source of information is valid.
Exactly. He's basically saying, you can trust me on the psychological stuff, which you can't prove, because I can demonstrate that I know the factual stuff, which you can prove.
It's a brilliant strategy to bypass the listener's intellectual defense mechanisms.
It really is, and it acts as a bridge, leading us into the deeper philosophical waters, because once you start to accept that Seth knows what he's talking about, he starts dropping some really heavy metaphysical truths.
He does.
And in this session, he goes hard on the concept of killing.
This is a part of the session that feels incredibly relevant, maybe even more so today than it was in 1965. Seth makes this very direct, categorical statement. He says, it is wrong for civilized human beings to kill.
Now, wait a minute. Nature is filled with killing. Animals kill for food every single day. Is Seth saying that the entire natural world is wrong?
No, and he draws a very sharp, very important distinction there. He says when an animal kills in the jungle, it's for survival, it's for food, it's part of a natural balance.
There's no ego in it. No ego, no malice. The life force is, in his words, replaced. It's part of a cycle of energy. It's impersonal.
But when humans do it,
Humans are different. Seth says when civilized man kills, whether it's in wars or in crime or through capital punishment, he is, and this is a quote, ripping out a part of himself.
ripping out a part of himself, that implies a connection, a unity that we don't normally see or acknowledge.
It goes right back to the core Seth concept of the unity of consciousness. The idea that all that is one unified field of awareness. If we're all fundamentally connected, if at the deepest level I am you and you are me, then if I kill you, I am literally engaging in a form of self-mutilation.
That is an incredibly powerful and disturbing image.
And he adds a chillingly pragmatic note to it. He says, and I think this is a paraphrase, but it's very close to the text, that an enemy who is dead is far more harmful to you than an enemy who is still alive.
Whoa. Let's just pause on that for a second. A dead enemy is more dangerous. How does that work?
Because death is not an end. Seth is adamant about this. It's a change of form, a change of focus. So if you kill someone in a fit of rage or in a war, you haven't destroyed their consciousness. You've just liberated it from the limitations of a physical body.
So you've basically just created a ghost with a grudge.
Worse than that, you've created a concentrated field of negative, vengeful energy that you can no longer see or interact with physically, but which can still affect you mentally, emotionally, and spiritually.
So by killing them, you haven't solved the problem.
You've escalated it.
Yeah.
You've moved the conflict to a spiritual plane where you are actually at a significant disadvantage.
That's terrifying. And it completely flips the script on the whole idea of eliminating a threat.
It does. You can't eliminate consciousness. You can only transform the relationship. You have to deal with the energy. You have to find cooperation. And cooperation is the key word Seth keeps coming back to in this session. He says the entire universe is maintained by the cooperation of all living things.
Which is a good transition, actually, to a slightly spicy take Seth had in this session.
Oh, yes. The Tibetan monks.
You would think a disembodied spirit teacher would be a huge fan of monks. Oh, they're so holy, they meditate all day, they're so spiritual. But Seth, he was not impressed.
Not at all. He calls them shallow.
Shallow. I mean, that is a burn. Coming from an entity like Seth, that's harsh.
It's a scathing critique. He acknowledges their abilities. He says, yes, they use astral projection. They've mastered certain forms of psychic energy. But his criticism is this. The peasantry all around them lives in abject misery, poverty, and hopelessness.
And the monks are just checking out.
They're using their advanced abilities to escape from physical reality, not to improve it. And for Seth, that's a failure.
That's a massive critique of what we might call spiritual bypassing today, isn't it?
It's exactly that. Seth is intensely practical. He believes spirituality must have a practical application. If you have these great powers, if you can leave your body and perceive other realities, but you don't use that insight to help the person who is starving right next door to you, then you've missed the entire point. You aren't deep. You're shallow.
I love that. It really grounds the metaphysics. It's not about floating away on a cloud of bliss. It's about being here now and making this reality a better, more compassionate place.
Which is the absolute perfect segue to the final, and let's be honest, the most trippy part of this entire session.
This is the part where my brain started to hurt a little, in a good way.
The construction of physical reality.
Right. So let's reset the scene again. They are still sitting in the dark around this little coffee table. There's a wine glass on it. And Seth uses these everyday objects as props to explain how matter itself works.
And he doesn't just say we influence it. He says we create it.
He says, and this is almost a direct quote, each person creates their own world, their own atoms and molecules.
Let that sink in for a minute.
Okay, so let's try to unpack that. I am looking at a table in my room right now. You're in a different room looking at your table. We both think we are looking at a solid, objective object called a table.
Seth says we are not. He says, I am, right now, constructing a table with my psychic energy, literally creating its atoms and molecules from consciousness. And you, in your room, are constructing a table with your psychic energy.
So there are two different tables. There are billions of tables.
There are as many tables as there are observers. But, and this is the absolute crucial part, we use telepathy to agree on the coordinates.
We use telepathy.
Yes, subconsciously, constantly, at a level far below our normal awareness, we are all telepathically communicating with each other to agree on the consensus reality. We're all broadcasting. Okay, the table goes here, the chair goes there.
We agree on the placement so we don't just bump into things or walk right through them.
Exactly.
So reality is basically a massive multiplayer online game. We're all rendering the graphics locally on our own individual machines, but we're constantly sharing the coordinate data with the server so the game makes sense for everyone.
That is a brilliant, perfect modern analogy. Yes. Seth says, my table and your table are different constructions, but we agree on where they are.
And he claimed this wasn't just a metaphor, that this could be proven mathematically.
He did. He just threw that out there. This individual construction of matter can be verified mathematically. He didn't give them the formula that night, obviously.
That's
a little busy. But he insisted it's not just philosophy. It's a form of physics that our science hasn't discovered yet.
And he told the Gallaghers, the guests, that they live in many worlds at once.
Which ties it all together. We are constantly navigating this multiverse of our own private constructions that we then stitch together through telepathic agreement into a shared, stable consensus reality. It's a beautiful, if slightly disorienting concept.
It really makes you look at your furniture differently. You're not just sitting on a chair, you're actively creating it. I made this. I'm holding this object in place with my mind right now.
And if you stop agreeing, well, that's the big question, isn't it?
So looking back at this one session 182, it is just packed to the gills. We went from a spooky candle flare-up to childhood trauma causing hay fever.
To the moral implications of war, to the quantum construction of a coffee table.
It's a perfect example of why the Seth material is so enduring and so powerful. It doesn't stay in one lane. It shows how everything, physics, psychology, spirituality, health, it's all woven together into one unified fabric.
And the humor. Let's not lose sight of that. Seth calling out the family secrets, calling Bill's ulcer a parasite, scaring Bill with a shout at the door. It's not dry. It's not a lecture. It's alive. It's very alive. And I think for you, for anyone listening, the takeaway here is multifold. First, take a hard look at your health. Are you carrying something, an allergy, a chronic ache, because of an old emotional identification with someone from your past?
Second, look at your relationships. Are you blaming someone, like Bill blamed his father based on a misunderstanding from decades ago that you've never re-examined?
And third, maybe the biggest one, look at your world. Look at the room you're in. And just for a second, entertain the idea that you are an active participant in creating it, quite literally atom by atom.
And if you want to dive deeper into this, and trust me, we have only scratched the surface of the thousands and thousands of pages available, you really need to go to the source.
Absolutely. We always encourage you to read the original material for yourself. You can find the books, including the early sessions, at the New Awareness Network website and bookstore. The address is sethcenter.com/their early sessions.
Please go there, get the books, support the publisher who keeps this essential material in print. It is absolutely worth your time.
And just remember, this deep dive is just a guide. It's our interpretation. The real discovery happens when you sit down and engage with the text yourself.
So as we blow out the candle on this session, I want to leave you with one final thought. A little something to keep you up tonight, maybe?
What's on your mind?
We talked about this idea of the personal universe. The concept that I create my chair, you create your chair, and we telepathically agree that they exist in the same room.
Right. The consensus reality.
Well, what happens if we stop agreeing? What happens to the world when we stop broadcasting our location data to each other? If I stop agreeing, truly deeply stop agreeing that the wall in front of me is there, can I just walk through it? Or does that just mean I'm now totally alone, trapped in my own private universe?
That is the ultimate question, isn't it? Are we locked in here by the laws of physics, or are we just locked in by cosmic peer pressure?
Something to mull over. Keep an open mind, everyone. We'll see you in the next deep dive.